Next, we are going to hear from Lucas Carey speaking on Logos and Mythos, an archetypal interplay of Eros. Welcome, Lucas.
Humans live in a deeply symbolic world where every word evokes worlds. This presentation is intended to demonstrate and reveal the interrelatedness between logos and mythos, two Greek terms with a long intertwined history. Logos is defined as a discourse of rational intelligibility, but is elevated to spiritual heights, such as in the book of John. In the beginning was the Logos, and Logos was with God, and Logos was God. In this sense, Logos was seen as a gift from God, a gift of godhood. But as it evolved into the modern period, which banished divinity, Logos was seen as an autonomous given, wholly transcendent, and yet uninterested in its relationality. Mythos is defined as the oral storytelling tradition of mythic culture, as captured in the earliest poetic comedies and tragedies performed at the Theater of Dionysus in Athens. Subsequently, mythos has evolved to encompass the many beliefs and assumptions that we take for granted in the story of our lives. Now, we may think of logos and mythos as representing the left brain, right brain frameworks of consciousness as established by Ian McGilchrist, the evolution of mythic and mental rational structure of consciousness developed by Jean Gebser, and finally through this dialectic of solar and lunar consciousness developed by Howard Teague. Our modern alienation of the self in relationship to the world has torn asunder the very fabric of our logos's origin story. Logos has fashioned themselves as an air plant, unrooted in the ground of Gaia. After much excavation in history and a feminist rereading of the great Greek myths, I have rediscovered that Gaia is the mother of all archetypes, for even her husband, Ouranos, the sky god, is dependent upon her terrestrial being, for there is no atmosphere without the geosphere. I have also discovered that Hermes, another name for Logos, is Gaia's mediator, her eyes, her ears, and her voice, the messenger of the gods, who is one of the few able to dive into the underworld. In the postmodern world of increasing fragmentation and a pluralism of worlds seemingly moving greater distances from one another, I believe it is logos that must remember our dismemberment as they collect the shattered fragments of consciousness lost and forgotten in the underworld. There are many cultural conceptions for the underworld, the below, the past events that ground our lives. Hell, the ungrund, groundless ground, the prima materia, first matter, absolute nothingness, shunyata, emptiness, Ein Sof, unending infinity, the quantum field, Gaia's womb, the cosmic void, or Tehom, depths of the watery abyss. I have come to find my preferred term for referencing this paradoxical ground of being is the fertile void. This fertile void encompasses both the existential via negativa of the void, while also retaining the creativity and life-generative capacity of this ground of being. This is the realm of death and rebirth. Although these two archetypal forces have long co-created our human experience, there has become a power over relationship, as Logos has sought to disenchant the world from meaning. This has reduced myth to something that must be busted. However, so much of Mythos's potential has opened up as Logos has wandered the world, collecting shards of knowledge previously unknown to us, as demonstrated in science fiction. Both archetypes contain something the other requires, if only they could have an open and honest discussion. Today, as both Logos and Mythos wander the underworld searching for what they've forgotten, they come across one another, unknowingly lured by the siren's call. Let's take a deep breath together as we descend into the underworld and listen in on their conversation. We come to consciousness in a deep cavern in the earth. Stale, humid air clings to our lungs. We see Mythos frustratingly drawing a map in the dampened dirt with their finger. Logos, wandering the tunnels of Earth's womb, comes across Mythos. Hey, is that an astronomical map? I'm pretty good at calculations if you need some help, but what use does that have down here? Oh, hello. Yeah, I could use some help calculating. You're right, it is an astronomical map, but I'm drawing it to gain some astrological insight into where in the hell I am. Oh, so you believe in that astrology stuff? Don't you know that's a pseudoscience? Well, pseudoscience has kind of been defined to quarantine astrology from the rest of the scientific enterprise. It's a bit anachronistic and a straw man fallacy because astrology does not claim to be pure science. Before the Enlightenment era, there wasn't a separation between the pursuit of truth in science and religion, or in astronomy and astrology. Exactly. Science had to leave behind that superstition to become objective and fact-based. Well, not exactly. Although modern science has expanded our knowledge of the world around us, it never truly escapes subjectivity and belief. All of science is grounded in presuppositions based on the reigning paradigm of the culture. Even mathematicians must believe in the axiom 1 = 1 before they may enter their system. Yeah, but science has the scientific method, which centers around verifiability and falsifiability. You know, without these democratically fashionable virtues, quest for truth would be in the hands of anyone claiming divine revelation. True, but every scientific method begins with a hypothesis, which determines what type of data is considered and collected. It is true verifiability and falsifiability are virtues of science, but not every scientist or discipline prioritizes the same virtue. Virtues are, after all, at whim to personal, social, cultural, and political trends. Wait, so you're saying that subjectivity and opinion are baked into the scientific method? Precisely, but that should not be the enemy of science. It's not a flaw or an error to have a place for human subjectivity and belief in the world of science. But if human subjectivity and belief and opinion are part of the method, how can we ever be sure we're talking about objective reality? Now, that is a great question with an uncertain answer. We have no assurances that our knowledge actually lines up with how things are because all sense data is filtered and interpreted through our experience. All we can say about our scientific theories are that they are quite accurate, but most scientific theories in history are eventually proven wrong. Well, that's a bummer. So then the astrological theory was proven wrong? Not quite, Logos. Many of the old beliefs that the astrological discipline relied upon were discarded with the Enlightenment era. After the Protestant Reformation, Europeans did not have to blindly accept the faith of the Catholic Church, but instead they had a choice. That choice, although quite limited at the time, was in part related to the birth of the free will as identified with the autonomous human intellect. But astrology at that time was a highly deterministic discipline, which fell out of fashion for the modern human self. And yet you still believe in it? Isn't astrology all about like birthdays and horoscopes? Superficially, yes, but let me put it into some context. Imagine you are one of our early human ancestors, living in golden plains, rolling hills to the east, and a verdant green forest to the south. The sun is setting in a spectacular ombre of warm colors, melting into purple and midnight blue of twilight. The astral light begins to reveal the starry heavens as your tribe begins to set up a fire. Myth, dance, cooking, and music reverberate and echo the twirling processes of the night sky. Can you imagine the sense of reverence one might have in participating in such a fundamental human experience? Man, I really miss the fresh air. Wow. Yeah, that does sound beautiful compared to this bleak underworld, but what does that have to do with astrology? My Logos friend, astrology is not about some activity happening out there. Astrology has always been about Earth and the way that we humans tell the stories of our lives. Take the Great Bear constellation, Ursa Major. This constellation is located in the northern sky, which just so happens to coincide with bears only living in the northern hemisphere. This constellation is also most visible during spring, once those bears have emerged from their winter hibernation. Wait, what? How could our ancestors have known that connection? Was it just a lucky guess? Our early ancestors didn't know in the way we typically define knowing in theoretical or rational terms. Their sense of knowledge was deeply embedded in an original participation with the cosmos. Our ancestors were able to intuitively read the world as a book of nature. But don't astrologers believe in gods and goddesses and that like somehow these distant planets are causing our behavior? It's true that these were common beliefs in Hellenistic astrology and much of the pagan and pre-axial world. Nowadays, though, we understand the gods and goddesses as archetypes, infused both in human experience and the cosmos at large. Each archetypal expression exists on a spectrum, allowing for a great deal of variety and free will. We also don't assume any causal behavior between the planets and human affairs, but there is mounting evidence that the correlation is much more than just an outlier. So are you implying that astrology isn't hinged upon these beliefs? Precisely. Just like all disciplines, we are constantly updating our enterprises based on our contemporary cultural and theoretical assumptions. Astrology is a mixture of science and art, which sure may qualify as a pseudoscience, but cooking and music are equally mixtures of science and art. That doesn't mean that they don't provide value to human life or are unworthy of our time. Oh, I'm sorry, Mythos. I didn't know it was offensive to call astrology a pseudoscience. I just thought, what? You just thought you could save me from my own ignorance? As if I still lived in the dark ages before the, light of reason redeemed me from the world of superstition? Geez, I did not mean it that way, but I see that impacted you. It sounds like you've been here before. I honestly didn't realize there was so much more to it. I was just taught by my philosophy of science teacher that it was an example of poor critical thinking and bad science. Yeah, I have heard what you're talking about. There is an irony that in an attempt to be pro-science, there's an irrational fear of astrology as if it threatens science's existence. I've seen very intelligent and rational people go on long tirades against astrology, which contain nothing more than ad hominem attacks. Damn, that's unfortunate. I honestly didn't expect you to have such reasonable arguments, most of which I had frankly never heard of. Well, Logos, I think you'll find that there's a great deal of you within me and a great deal of me within you. But I'm hoping you could teach me a thing or two about these calculations. I found Neptune and Pluto, but I can't seem to find Uranus's location. Oh, hey, I think I found that geometrical pattern. Uranus completes a kite. I think the River of Styx should be this way. Ah, brilliant. I think it's best we travel together from here on out. There's no telling what apparitions we may come across. And if I remember correctly, Charon owes me a favor. If we come across an ancestor too, I would love to ask them how they knew about that bear constellation correlation. Our consciousness withdraws from the scene as both Logos and Mythos, hand in hand, move towards their destiny, following the flow of the river Styx to emerge transformed in ways previously unimaginable. Now that Logos and Mythos have hashed out a bit of their differences, I, Luca, hope to close the following threads. As a school with a philosophy that is integrative, I believe the dimension of depth is integral. If we imagine ourselves on the sphere of Gaia, to move upward like the transcendent is to move away from our Gaia kin, and to move downward is to move towards one another. Integration suggests a depth of inwardness and relationality. The archetypal underworld is not a location, a direction, a depth that pervades all things. Every direction we look, there is a fertile void, a starry abyss, just hidden behind the physicality of the earth when we look down, and just beyond the blue of the sky when we look up. When we put to question ourselves and the world until everything culminates in one big question mark, the great doubt opens up just under our feet, and we come face to face with our mortality. If the modern psyche is undergoing a rite of passage, we must embrace a transformational philosophy equally concerned with regeneration and emergence as it is deconstructive and critical. Bereshit bara Elohim, in beginning, separated itself as gods and goddesses. May we travel the worlds of human experience, collecting the shards of consciousness for a repair of the world. Tikkun Olam. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Luca, for that really powerful evocation of the convergence of logos and mythos, something we certainly all need in this world. Is there a question or a comment for Luca? And I can't see everyone right now, so you can use the raise hand function, or you can speak out if you have something on your mind. Raymond Singh, I see your hand.
And okay, just in case we can't ask questions, but yeah, that was a brilliant presentation, Luca. I feel like the Eros in question is like sort of basically you're advocating dialogue, and so it was really interesting that you framed your talk in a dialogue. I guess my question would be then, how would you seek to like incorporate or overcome like this idea of like the paradox of tolerance? So, including competing systems, including more voices into the mix, you're inevitably going to run across systems that are just actively bent on eradicating the other. How would you kind of, channel Eros or frame or construct dialogue in such a way that you can get past that, or can you even get past that? I guess this is the question.
Thank you, Raymond. That's a rich question. Yeah, I guess the best way to frame that question is with my studies with the fertile void and the underworld as that abyss that I know that you have read with Catherine Keller's work of leaving spaciousness for the void, especially the fertile void, for things to emerge in a way that allows mystery to not just become one variable within the system, but the fields from which the system exists. And I'm kind of thinking of, I guess, William Desmond's work, where he contextualizes the Hegelian dialectic as essentially consuming all systems in a sort of totalitarian, we reach some kind of culmination. And I really appreciated Desmond's critique of leaving that sort of space of the liminal, of the world between words, the space between words. And I find that sort of silence and that sort of spaciousness is oftentimes where I experience things arising in ways that my logos mind can only wish to find patterns in, but sometimes that just unfolds organically.
Beautiful, thank you. May we all find inspiration and insight in the liminal, and in that fertile void that you so skillfully led us through. Thank you, Luca.